Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video, and today I want to talk for a little bit about the trade deadline. As I'm recording this video, we're just a week away. It's February 1st, the deadline is February 8th, and people are excited. I'm seeing a bunch of mock trades on my Twitter timeline. A lot of y'all have been commenting on my videos talking about potential trades. I know I've been talking and thinking about them a lot. A lot of trade machine screenshots. Some of them are the worst things you've ever seen, but there are some fun ideas out there, and of course a million rumors circulating. People are hype, and it makes sense. We're currently living in an era where player movement feels more frequent than ever. Blockbuster trades feel more common than they've ever been, especially at the past few deadlines. Like, we've gotten really spoiled by all the blockbuster moves we've seen the past couple of years. 2022, we saw CJ McCollum, longtime Blazer, get dealt away the beginning of the end for that Portland team. Tyrese Halliburton and Domantas Sabonis get swapped. Tyrese goes over to Indiana as the new face of the franchise before eventually starting his rise to superstardom over the past couple of years. And Sabonis teams up with De'Aaron Fox, the best player he had ever played with, and they brought Sacramento back to the playoffs the following year. Same deadline, James Harden gets sent over to Philadelphia in exchange for Ben Simmons, who had been holding out the whole season, breaking up the Nets' big three that would continue to break up very quickly over the next year leading into next deadline. It started with Kyrie being traded over to the Dallas Mavericks, requesting a trade seemingly out of nowhere right before the deadline, and eventually joining Luka Doncic in a star-studded backcourt. We saw the biggest trade in trade deadline history with Kevin Durant pretty much as soon as the clock struck midnight on trade deadline day, being dealt over to the Phoenix Suns, teaming up with Devin Booker and Chris Paul as well as DeAndre Ayton. They sent over Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, as many first-round picks and pick swaps as you can imagine, and again, the biggest deal in the history of the trade deadline. There are also some other pretty impactful moves like the D'Lo, Mike Conley, Russell Westbrook three-team deal, and some other moves that the Lakers made to eventually push themselves to the Western Conference Finals. We've gotten some really active deadlines leading into this year, and already this year, we've gotten some interesting trades, like the OG Anunoby one, sending him over to the Knicks, where currently, the Knicks look like one of the best teams in basketball. He's got their defense at an unbelievable level at the moment, and if he stays there, this Knicks team is going to be a powerhouse for years to come, especially because they've got more moves to potentially make. The Pascal Siakam trade is huge for Indiana, an all-star caliber player to play alongside Tyrese, and once Tyrese gets healthy and the two of them build some chemistry, they're going to be one of the scarier duos in the Eastern Conference, and you give the rest of that young team some time to progress, the Pacers are going to be terrifying before you know it. You've also got like the Terry Rozier deal, which hasn't worked out great so far for Miami, but I do think eventually as they build more rhythm, and if they make some moves at the deadline to kind of reshape this roster, the Heat could look really good with Terry Rozier in their uniform. So there's already been a good bit of stuff that's happened. There's a lot of rumors circulating. But outside of those trades over these past few days, leading into the deadline itself, again, we're just a week away, there's not quite a lot going on. We're hearing a lot of rumors like Dejounte is still out there on the market, and him going to the Lakers feels like a real possibility. The Warriors are apparently gauging like Chris Paul, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins' value, so maybe they're active players. The Bulls feel like a team that could deal some pieces. The Wizards have guys like Kyle Kuzma, Tyus Jones, Daniel Gafford, amongst others that I think could be involved in some deals. There are a number of key role players, some other teams that could make a couple more minor moves. Maybe the Raptors try and trade a couple more pieces away. They've already started this rebuild. But that's all kind of hypothetical. There's nothing super concrete at the moment. Not to mention, we're getting some reports that maybe not as many teams that seemingly could be active are actually going to be active on the market. We got a report a couple of days ago, I believe, from Mark Stein that Quinn Snyder is trying to convince Hawks brass to not trade Dejounte Murray. He wants to try and figure this thing out. A report coming that the Bulls may not be willing to deal any of their top pieces. They may just kind of stand pat for what feels like the 38th straight deadline in a row. The Nets fit the mold of a typical team that would blow it up, and they do seem to be interested in dealing some of their players, but the top guys on their roster like Mikal and Nick Claxton or Cam Johnson seem like they're most likely off the market. The Warriors, while they may be considering all these big-time deals, they're not very frequently a team that is a big player at the deadline. Like the Wiggins trade a few years ago was a pretty substantial move, but outside of that, haven't made a lot of big-time acquisitions. So I don't know if they're going to. I mean, this year's a little bit different because they're bad this year when typically they've been good. But at the same time, like, how much value do Wiggins and Chris Paul and Klay Thompson hold at the moment? I don't really know. Plus, there's no real like superstar players or even currently established all-star caliber talents that are on the market at the moment. Like Dejounte Murray is pretty clearly the best player in the market, and he's good, but he's not the level of player that we've seen get traded for the past few deadlines. So with all this in mind, the more that I take a look at the NBA landscape as a whole, I don't think it's going to be that eventful a deadline. Now, I do think there are still going to be some big-time deals in terms of role players being traded, maybe a couple of fringe all-star caliber guys, moves that can definitely shift the title picture and change up the NBA landscape. Like, for me personally, any deal is really exciting. I just delve into the NBA that much. I mean, I talk about it almost daily here on the channel. I'm excited for any move, but if you're someone who really wants to see the all-NBA, all-star, superstar caliber players get traded, blockbuster deals involving a bunch of first-round picks, you're probably going to be disappointed by this deadline. It's not going to be up to the caliber of the past couple of years. And I can already see a lot of NBA fans saying, wow, this deadline was boring. This is one of the worst ones we've seen in a while, because those big names probably aren't going to be moved at the frequency that we've seen in years past. So the question is, why? What about the NBA right now is causing this to be a little bit of a drier deadline than years past? There are a couple of reasons. The first thing that comes to mind for me is the play-in tournament. The play-in tournament gives teams hope. It's a big change to the NBA. Imagine in years past, say you're like the Atlanta Hawks. Right now, 20-27 on the season, 4.5 games back of the 8-seeded Orlando Magic, who have been falling down a little bit as of late, but have still been playing some pretty good basketball. That's not a crazy amount of games to go ahead and make up in the second half of a season, but it's decently substantial. So in years past, the Hawks may say like, okay, we don't know if we're going to be able to make this run past Orlando. You've also got Chicago in front of you. Maybe they figure things out. Some teams right around you. They may say, okay, we're just going to go ahead and blow this thing up right now, not waste anyone's time. But at the moment in the modern NBA, the Hawks are the 10 seed. They're in the play-in tournament right now. And theoretically, all they'd have to do was win a couple of games and boom, they could be in the playoffs. They could make some revenue off of that, get the fans involved, get excited. Like, hey, we found our way to the playoffs. Anything can happen, before maybe eventually blowing it up in the offseason when they probably lose in the first round. And I think this hope is only exacerbated by what happened last season with both the Lakers and the Heat as playing teams making it to the conference finals, and then of course the Heat making the NBA finals themselves. The Lakers spent the entire season struggling up until the deadline. They made some key moves, and then boom, they were one of the better teams in the second half of the season, made it into the playoffs through the play-in tournament, and made their way to the conference finals. That's a blueprint for probably what a lot of teams are going to try and do nowadays. You've also got the Miami Heat, who literally lost the first play-in game. They were a few minutes away. They were down to the Chicago Bulls in the final minutes from not even making the playoffs, and they found their way to the NBA Finals. It shows that theoretically anything is possible if you can just make it in. But those, in my opinion, are outliers. I don't really think any of the teams right now that are in that play-in range are going to be capable of that type of success unless they make some crazy moves at the deadline, which is always possible. And that is kind of the appeal of the play-in, is all these teams have chances. Teams that in the past might consider blowing it up think all we have to do is get to the playoffs, and who knows? The Hawks and Bulls are two examples of teams that theoretically in the past could blow it up, but instead are in the thick of the play-in race. The Jazz, if they hadn't been so successful recently, I think could have traded away guys like Kelly Olynyk and Jordan Clarkson, and maybe they still will. But the fact that they're in the play-in race at the moment and have been playing pretty good basketball, I don't know if they're actually going to. The Nets are also in this boat, but it's a little bit weirder for them because they don't have their draft pick this year. Although to me, I've made it known on this channel, I think they should still trade guys anyways. Don't worry about the sunk cost of your draft pick. Just do what's best for your future. And to me, that's recouping some assets for some of these players that you have because you're not very good. But anyways, those are an example of some teams. And I think with what the Lakers and Heat did last year, this hope that they've been given over the past few years at the play-in has only built up more in itself. There's not as many teams that are definitive sellers, which leads to a bit of a weirder trade market. Another big thing that I think is contributing to this weird market at the moment is the current concentration of draft picks. As I'm sure you've noticed, first-round picks in particular have become the currency of the NBA as of late. You want to pick up a star, you got to throw in like 4 or 5 first-round picks, sometimes even 6 pick swaps, probably young players in addition, but the first-round picks have become a staple of pretty much every big trade that we've seen in the last like 3-4 years. And that has led to a large concentration of those picks for a select few teams. I don't remember where I saw this stat. I wish I knew so I could give them credit. But I saw a stat recently that 11 teams in the NBA right now control 75% of the currently tradable first-round picks. These teams are the Thunder, Spurs, Knicks, Nets, Pelicans, Magic, Raptors, Rockets, Grizzlies, Jazz, and Trailblazers. Those 11 teams have 75% of the first-round picks that are currently tradable, whether that's because there's protection backups for other teams, those teams have given them their picks, you know, the Stepien rule where you can not trade 2 first-round picks in consecutive years. By some way or another, those teams currently own a majority of the draft capital in the NBA, and not a lot of these teams are big-time buyers. The Raptors are selling. The Blazers and Spurs are rebuilding, probably looking for more draft picks. They're not really out there on the market for win-now players in the moment. out. Everyone's hurt from Memphis, so they're probably not going to do anything substantial. The Nets are in limbo. The Magic are a young team developing right now in the playoff hunt, so they could maybe go out and add a piece, but I don't think they're looking for a star in the moment. The Knicks just made a deal and seem to be waiting for that superstar deal to finish the puzzle. Pelicans kind of have their group set. Like, I could see them making a move, but I don't think it's coming anytime soon. The Thunder are really good and could theoretically chase some upgrades with their treasure trove of picks, but it seems like they're taking a bit of a slower approach and seem way more likely to like grab role players at the deadline rather than a star, especially because, again, there's not really that big superstar player out there that could like complete this team. You've got a team like the Rockets who are seemingly star hunting according to a new report, but who knows if anything will come with that because, again, not a lot of stars are actively available. And then for the Utah Jazz, we don't know what they're going to do. So these teams have a lot of the draft capital, but most of them aren't really out there in the market looking to add stars. They're kind of just chilling and waiting. They're rebuilding, trying to figure out what's the next step. Meanwhile, the teams that are actively searching for big-time upgrades don't have as much capital. The Bucks really want to bolster this roster, get some more depth, but they've got like no draft picks. They gave it all up for Damian Lillard and Drew Holiday before him. The Celtics don't have much either. They've got a little bit more than the Bucks, but you know, they traded for Drew, they traded for Porzingis. They made some big-time moves. They don't really have capital to spare. The Wolves gave up like all their picks for Gobert. They could use some upgrades. The Warriors don't have a lot of capital and some weird contracts that probably aren't the most tradable. The Lakers are in pick hell at the moment. They've given up pretty much everything, have like one first-round pick left. The Suns have no capital. They're way past all in. So some of these teams that feel like they need to make upgrades could bolster their depth or go for another star player to just build onto this team. They don't have a lot of draft capital. There's also not a lot of big names on the market for some of those other teams. There's not a lot of teams that actually want to trade players because there's that glimmer of hope from the play-in. It's all kind of a mess that, in my opinion, is kind of building it all together into a trade market that is just kind of strange at the moment. And to me, this will culminate in a deadline that probably isn't as exciting as years past. We're not going to see these Kyrie Irving or James Harden or Kevin Durant type names being traded. It's just not going to happen. The biggest name probably will be like a Dejounte Murray. Maybe Klay Thompson gets traded. Like, that would be a pretty big deal. But I think we're going to see more deals like Kyle Kuzma to the Kings potentially, which is still fun. Like, I would really like that. I'd probably make a video on that trade. I think it's a needle mover, but just a random casual fan, you know, scrolling through Twitter and seeing the trade probably isn't going to think that much of it. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. It's cool to see some continuity in the league. I still think role player trades are really impactful and exciting. It's just an effect of what's been going on in the NBA right now, and I thought it was interesting, so I thought I would go ahead and make a video about it right here. Let me know what your thoughts are. Do you think we see some big moves? I mean, maybe someone pops up, like Kyrie didn't pop up as available last year at the deadline till right around this time, like I think 6 or 7 days before. Kevin Durant was traded out of nowhere, but those two players did kind of have some rumors leading up to it, like both requesting out in the offseason beforehand. And speaking of the offseason, I think we could see some big time moves in the offseason. I just think right now the NBA is in a bit of a limbo state for a bunch of different reasons, which is just going to lead to a less eventful deadline in terms of these blockbuster deals. But I appreciate y'all watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. Drop me some predictions about the trade deadline down below in the comments. Where do you think players end up? What players would you like to see your favorite team pursue at the deadline? And if you've got a bold prediction, a big name that could maybe be dealt out of nowhere, drop that down below too, so you can brag about it if it actually happens. I appreciate y'all watching. I'll see y'all later. Real one, say it back.